Welcome and thank you for attending this virtual presentation. My name is Tommaso Santilli and I am a PhD student in Education, Culture, Heritage and Territories at University of Macerata. This research was carried out by the Research Group in Didactics and Special Pedagogy of University of Macerata, which is coordinated by Professor Katia Giacconi, full professor of Special Pedagogy and president of the Italian Scientific Society of Special Pedagogy. This contribution illustrates a theoretical reflection and practical experience on co-designing practices in the field of accessibility. Specifically, it illustrates the methods and tools adopted in a study concerning museum accessibility and inclusion of visitors with disabilities in cultural heritage fruition. The value of co-designing practices for the achievement of accessible life environments and increase of social participation will be discussed. The fundamental need to foster inclusion of people with disabilities in life environments was set forth in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities from 2006, which is a central resource to orient inclusion policies across nations. The Convention calls attention on the need to promote and protect the basic human rights and fundamental freedoms of people with disability, with the aim of reaching full equality among citizens. Article 9 of the UN Convention focuses on accessibility and interprets the right to access products, services, and contexts as a necessary condition for one's independence and full participation to all aspects of life. In this regard, accessibility gains primary importance as a vehicle for social inclusion and quality of life, as the possibility to access products, services, and contexts with ease and efficacy. As the UN Convention hints, accessibility can be interpreted both in its physical dimension, meaning the possibility of entering, exiting, and circulating within physical spaces, and its cultural dimension, meaning the possibility of perceiving and understanding knowledge and information. As both these trajectories underline the centrality of environmental factors on the effective level of inclusion and participation that a person can experience, these considerations mirror an ecological approach to disability. Such an approach, promoted by the World Health Organization from 2001 and embodied in the International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health, relies on a culturally shifting perspective on disability. Indeed, the ecological approach focuses on health and functioning of each person with reference to specific contexts and active participation opportunities. The ecological approach, which is in line with the concept of quality of life, can contribute to special pedagogy as a theoretical framework that orients pedagogical actions. Translating the need to increase participation in life environments from theory to practice, universal design appears as a viable design approach to increase both accessibility and usability of products, services, and contexts for all people to the greatest extent possible, regardless of individual differences. However, with reference to museum contexts, the provision of accessibility guidelines regarding cultural heritage fruition is still mostly limited to physical accessibility, concerning the removal of architectural barriers, with fewer studies focusing on cultural accessibility or extended reality technologies accessibility. To fill such research gap, the approaches and frameworks of special pedagogy can represent a fruitful resource to orient inclusive design practices, addressing the needs of people with disabilities through participatory methods and drawing innovative trajectories for multidisciplinary user-centered processes. Bearing in mind such considerations, our study focused on answering the following research question through the practical experience of designing an inclusive and accessible pathway within a museum of the Marche region in Italy. What strategies and solutions can be developed to foster inclusion of visitors with sensory and intellectual disabilities within museum contexts? With reference to methodology and participants, our study consisted in a participatory research to design integrated solutions for museum accessibility. Specifically, we implemented focus groups involving our main stakeholders, meaning people with sensory and intellectual disabilities, to gain insights on accessibility issues and map facilitators and barriers within the chosen museum context. Therefore, we implemented an ecological approach, focusing on the environmental factors of the museum context. The contributions of participants to focus groups were analyzed through grounded theory methodology to systematize the obtained data, and in this sense, a theoretical framework identifying the potentials and limits of museum accessibility according to stakeholders was developed. Lastly, the indications and ideas of participants were acknowledged and channeled through the design, development, and testing of an accessible, integrated museum pathway. The study involved people with sensory disabilities, visual and hearing impairments specifically, intellectual disabilities, and complex disabilities, recruited through the partnership that our research group has with local associations. Through the use of focus groups, we were able to identify the barriers and facilitators to museum accessibility for visitors with disabilities, according to our stakeholders. With reference to the first dimension, participants underlined the difficulties in integrating information of the museum path, as well as issues in space orientation and a general fragmented experience, which was also linked to abstract information. With reference to facilitators, participants connected interactivity, also through the use of digital technologies, experience-based learning, meaning learning through concrete experiences, customization, also through sensory paths, and storytelling as sources for engagement and participation. Accordingly, an integrated design for an accessible museum pathway was developed, consisting in the interconnection between four main solutions. Firstly, we designed and developed a tactile path, consisting in braille captions and a logos system to support space orientation of people with visual impairments. In the second place, we designed and developed an easy-to-read and easy-to-listen path, consisting in captions and audio guides that are easy to understand according to Inclusion Europe guidelines. Thirdly, we design and develop an extended reality path, giving visitors the opportunity to interact with high-fidelity reproductions of artifacts throughout augmented reality and virtual reality solutions. And lastly, we design and develop a didactic contents-based path, meaning that visitors were offered didactic contents before, during, and also after their museum visit. In other words, the integrated design allows visitors to customize their museum experience by choosing the preferred fruition modalities of the museum's contents, be it haptic exploration, accessible captions, audio guide, or interaction with three-dimensional reproductions of artifacts. And as a result, the integrated design can foster self-determination, customization, participation, and inclusion within the museum experience of all people. These slides show some examples of the tactile path. We have physical three-dimensional reproductions of the artifacts, captions in braille, the logos horizontal path, and also maps of the museum spaces in relief. All of these solutions can increase the museum accessibility for visitors with visual impairments. The development of a museum application was one of the results of our design experience. The application allows visitors to choose the preferred museum path and shows a map of the museum pathway. In each point of interest of the museum pathway, the visitor can choose the fruition modality they prefer. So they can interact with virtual artifacts, they can read an easy-to-read text, or they can listen to an easy-to-listen audio guide. Drawing to the conclusions, the co-design experience allowed our research group to develop effective accessibility solutions based on direct inputs given from participants. And in this sense, the theoretical frameworks of special pedagogy can inform design practices by offering a context-oriented and user-centered approach based on the identification of facilitators and barriers within the museum context to foster participation and inclusion of people with disabilities. Such an endeavor follows the acknowledgement of horizontal and participatory trajectories to promote innovation and establish meaningful relationships with local communities. In this slide, you can see some key references that oriented our study and provided meaningful insights for our research. This virtual presentation is over. I wanted to thank the organizers of this conference for offering us such an interesting space of scientific dialogue and connection to discuss and reflect upon design, transformation, and communities. Please feel free to contact us for any further information on this study, if you want to know more about our research projects, or if you want to collaborate with us. You can find attached the email of my advisor and coordinator of our research group, Katia Giaconi, and also my contact info. Thank you so much for your attention and have a nice conference.